The hedgerow blew apart, and a 30-ton M4 Sherman rocked to a halt while its 75mm gun glowed cherry red. The driver punched the hatch, dropped into wet June grass, and sucked air that tasted like cordite and crushed leaves. He could still hear the German Panther that hit him revving somewhere past the lane. He didn't look back. He jogged to the reserve line where another M4A3 sat warm, fuel topped off, ammo stacked. A crew chief waved him in like a ground marshal. The new loader buckled on his flak vest, passed up a shell, and said, "Back in the fight." This was the American magic trick the enemy never understood. The tank at the point was only the fingertip of a giant hand. Behind it were radios that pulled 105 seconds in minutes, P-47 seconds on call, wreckers with spare bogies, and a river of gas sloshing in jerrycans. Early in the war, German gunners laughed and called Shermans cookers. Then the United States redesigned ammo racks, added wet stowage that smothered flash, and drilled crews until bailout took 3 seconds flat. Destroy one hull, and the same men returned in another by afternoon, smarter and angrier. The 2nd Armoured Division lived this rhythm in Normandy. Hit, survive, replace, push. Reliability became courage. Courage became momentum. A tanker smacked the side of the replacement and said, "She'll get hit. We'll get out." The net crackled with a forward observer's voice reading a grid. A curtain of American shells walked through the orchard. The Sherman lurched forward into a lane that still smelled of sap and smoke. The Panther prowled for a duel. The Americans brought a system. You don't outmuscle that. You out-organize it. And that is exactly what the United States did on roads, in depots, in field shops, in the hearts of crews who believed their country planned for them to live. The enemy saw one tank die. What broke them was watching the same crew come back. A young ordnance engineer in a stateside shop spread ruptured 75mm casings across an oily bench and wrote home, "We're moving shells to save sons." Early M4S stored ammunition high and dry. Penetrations turned compartments into blowtorches. So the United States did something hard in wartime. It told the truth, then fixed the design. Wet ammunition, stowage, water, glycol jackets hugging the propellant turned flash into steam. Ammo bins shifted low and aft. Turret hatches multiplied. Escape routes got wider. Field manuals, parts lists, and clamps rolled forward by the pallet. In 1944, W. Shermans, the ones with wet stowage, joined the line, and maintenance companies converted older hulls in muddy orchards with the speed of a pit crew. A corporal slid out from beneath a turret ring near Saint-Lô, wiped grease on his sleeve, and said, "Turn her over." The engine barked, smoother than the last time. He grinned. "We fix men by fixing machines." That line describes an American kind of armor. On paper, the M4 stayed a 30-ton vehicle with a 75 or 76mm gun and medium armor. In practice, it became a life preserver wrapped in steel. German gun crews noticed that fewer American tanks burned long and hot. The crews they swore were dead on Tuesday were back by Friday with a different serial number on the hull. Survival changes everything. A living loader teaches 3 rookies how to keep elbows clear when the breech slams. A living commander remembers the exact hedge gap where the last ambush waited. A living driver trusts the machine enough to take the next hill. A dictatorship chased wonder weapons. A democracy iterated like a factory and shipped the fix to every battalion. Boring saved lives. Honest reports turned into better racks, faster radios, and smarter layouts. Under fire, honesty became armor. When the hatch swung open on a hit W. Sherman and men poured out coughing but alive, the blueprint had done its most American job: protect the citizen first, then win the fight. A German colonel named Hans von Luck watched American prisoners after Kasserine and shook his head at their rations. Chocolate, cigarettes, and a printed card telling them they were the best paid and best equipped soldiers in the world. He asked the question that drove his war diary. How can a Green Army fight veterans and still win? His answer came with a frown. He wrote that the Americans had first-class tanks and anti-tank guns, and more important, the supply dumps to replace any loss quickly. He saw the surface. Good machines in large numbers flowing from a continent of factories. He did not yet see the soul of the machine. He didn't see the W stamped into new stowage diagrams, the way ammunition no longer flashed into instant inferno, the split-second bailout drills that kept crews alive to fight tomorrow. A German gun team could win a single duel at 600 meters. Then the radios started singing. American artillery folded the hedgerow. 47 seconds took the crossroads, and the tank crews that should have died last week reappeared in fresh hulls today. A captured GI in Tunisia smiled when his captors marveled at the ration card and said, "It means my country plans for me to live." That sentence is the secret the enemy never cracked. Von Luck respected courage. He feared organization. He feared a nation that changed a design mid-war and then changed every copy in the field. He feared the river of fuel and parts that never slowed. The Americans printed their promise on paper in every kit, and then proved it from Bizerte to Saint-Lô. The enemy learned the hardest lesson first. A country that protects the individual becomes unstoppable when it scales that value. One day they saw a burning Sherman. The next week they saw the same crew again. That is the sound of morale breaking and the beginning of American victory. A Red Ball Express driver with grease on his cuffs double-clutched a GMC CCKW through a blackout village, past a stone well and a church bell that tolled on the hour. His dashboard rattled with jerrycan straps. His manifest read like a victory recipe. Fuel, 75 and 76 mm rounds. M1 clips, radio spares, engine blocks, bogie wheels, rations. At peak, the Red Ball moved more than 12,000 tons a day from beaches to the front, day and night, rain or dust, headlights off, speed governors broken for the mission. This wasn't romance. It was reliability as a weapon. Standard trucks, standard parts, standard routes. When a Sherman from the 4th Armoured threw a track near Coutances, a Diamond T wrecker arrived with a replacement bogie already chained to the bed. Hours, not days. A black mechanic in a hedgerow orchard tightened a final drive, slid out from under the hull, and shouted, "Give me throttle." The engine caught and settled. The crew climbed back in, smelling canvas, grease, and hope. German staffs wrote bitter notes. They could destroy tanks, but never the river that refilled them. That river began in Detroit and Pittsburgh, and roared through French lanes like a quiet flood. Willow Run stamped B 24 seconds at a rate of 1 per 63 minutes, and proved what America could do when it standardized everything. The same thinking lived inside the M4. The 2nd Armored Division's radios matched the artillery net. Supply sergeants matched part numbers to crates by flashlight. Drivers matched convoy pace to the hour. Reliability gets you to the fight and keeps you there when weather, bridges, and enemy shells say go home. The driver taped his baby's photo to the dash and muttered, "Every mile I drive keeps some crew alive," and pushed on into the dark. The depot map showed another convoy on his tail. The math looked impossible because it was American. Beat a tank, and you've won a moment. Beat this system, and you've beaten the future. No one did. A Sherman commander whispered a grid into his throat mic, pencil bouncing on a map flap, and waited with his cheek against the turret ring. Minutes later, the hedge ahead folded under American 105 mm, howitzer fire. Beyond it, a crossroads cracked open as P-47 Thunderbolts dove with bombs and 50 caliber guns. Radios turned a tank duel into an orchestra. The United States put radios down to the platoon, and the net meant that a medium tank did not fight alone. A 75 mm M3 on the M4's turret was only one instrument. The rest of the band was artillery, engineers, and air. A forward observer in a hedgerow slit wrote, 5 minutes from map to smoke, then adjusted fire by 10 yards and watched a German gun pit disappear. The tankers rolled when the last salvo lifted, and the tank's 30-ton weight pushed a gap big enough for infantry to flood through. German panzer aces found out the cruel way that winning a turret-to-turret contest meant nothing when the sky and the grid square belonged to America. The farmer's field smelled of crushed clover and hot metal. The commander slapped the loader's shoulder. Next round, ready? Ready. The loader could name the shell by feel in the dark because someone in a depot had labeled the crate the same way every time. The radio net hummed with call signs that matched every map sheet. The miracle here wasn't magic. It was a national habit of making everything fit everyone, so a scared 19-year-old could hit the right switch in a storm. German reports called it extraordinary flexibility. We called it Tuesday, the button called thunder, the thunder called victory. The enemy heard more than explosions. They heard the click of a system that never missed a beat, and for men who lived by the single perfect shot, there was nothing more terrifying than a country that could summon 100 perfect answers in 5 minutes flat. Normandy, July 1944. The morning opened with the roar of thousands of British and American guns. The ground shook as armoured brigades rolled toward Cayenne in what the Germans called a steel flood. It was Operation Goodwood. The shock was not the attack. The shock was what happened after. How does an army keep moving when a battle costs roughly 450 tanks in 3 days? A German officer named Hans von Luck looked across the fields and called it a masterpiece of preparation and logistics. He had stopped the breakout that week, but he knew he had not stopped the future. The Allies wrote the next chapter with fuel, depots, railheads, repair crews, and replacement crews, who climbed into fresh hulls that came off landing craft like clockwork. American battalions absorbed losses the way a strong boxer absorbs a punch, stagger, breathe, re-square, hit back harder. A tanker who had survived a hit because wet stowage smothered the fire reported for duty in a new M4A3W by sunset. Same call sign, new hull, he told the net. The Germans double-checked their kill claims. The sky filled with contrails. The roads filled with deuce and a halves. The map at headquarters filled with arrows that did not stop at the day's edge. The question answered itself in the rumble of engines at night. You keep attacking after losing hundreds of tanks by building a nation that treats replacement as a promise, not a prayer. You keep going because your design saves crews, and living crews make tomorrow stronger than today. You keep going because radios shorten time, because engineers throw bridges in the dark, because the 30-ton machine was built to be fixed under fire. The enemy realized they could win a day and still lose the month. That realization is the quietest and loudest sound in war. It is the sound of steel being beaten by statistics, process, and heart. It is the sound of a country that decided its people would live, and then made it true at scale. The orchard smelled like apples and hot oil, as an ordnance corporal slid from under a Sherman with a wet stowage kit clamped in place and yelled, "Crank her." The V8 coughed, then settled into a steady growl, and a crew that had bailed out at noon climbed back into a hull before dusk. This was America's other front line. The grease-stained tents where interchangeable parts, numbered crates, and quick-release clamps turned disaster into delay. A Diamond T wrecker brought a spare bogie. A parts sergeant matched the right final drive gear by flashlight. The manual read the same in every battalion because the army typed it that way on purpose. The enemy thought a kill claim ended the story. But the kit and the wrench wrote a new chapter within hours. Crews who survived because W-Rack's smothered flash walked into these shops, gave serial numbers, and got an almost familiar tank back with better internals than before. Mechanics taped safety diagrams to turret walls and made tankers rehearse 3-second bailouts. That's what democratic warfighting looks like. Protect men first, then send them forward smarter. A private from an ordnance maintenance battalion, hands black with grease, patted the hull and said, "You owe us a beer." The gunner laughed, coughed cordite, and replied, "I owe you my life." German diaries complained that American armor returned to the fight too fast to exploit. They were right. The kit in the crate, the numbered part in the bin, the recovery truck already idling, that was the miracle. It wasn't loud like artillery or glamorous like fighter bombers. It was quiet, disciplined, and relentless. When that rebuilt M4A3W rolled out, the crew heard the same net, the same call signs, the same promise. "You're not alone." The corporal watched the tank disappear into the hedgerow and wiped his socket set with the rhythm of a man who knew the line would hold because the shop would hold. War is chaos for the unprepared. For the United States it became a schedule. The wrench clicked, the kit latched, the comeback began again. The sergeant made every rookie practice bailouts until palms bled. 3 seconds through the hatch, roll, breathe, back in. He was alive because a W. Sherman didn't flash when a Panther punched the glacis last week, and now he taught with the urgency of a man who refused to lose another friend to confusion. Survivability was not just mercy, it was a multiplier. Save a crew once, and you gain a schoolhouse inside the turret. The loader learned to keep elbows clear of the recoiling 75. The driver learned to feel the track bite in wet clay. The commander learned to talk in maps, not panic. By August 1944, platoons were populated by men who had met fire, lived, and could transfer that knowledge in minutes. A replacement second lieutenant walked into the 2nd Armoured's bivouac with book learning. He left that night with a hedgerow course run by survivors. "We don't duel Panthers," a corporal told him. "We call the net, stack the deck, and make the field move." Across the line, German crews, brave and skilled, watched Americans fight as teams FOs tucked behind stone walls, engineers with Bangalore torpedoes, tanks talking to thunder. The shock wasn't that Shermans killed tanks, it was that Shermans summoned systems. A captured panzer loader muttered that the Americans seemed to know everything at once. That feeling came from radios in every platoon and veterans who remembered yesterday's ambush and erased it today. In a lull, the sergeant took out a photo of a Michigan assembly floor, rows of hulls under white lights, and tapped the image. "That's why you're going home," he said. The rookies stared. It wasn't bragging. It was a map of hope. By nightfall, the platoon drilled in the lane until muscle memory replaced fear. When the order came at dawn, hearts still raced, but hands did not. Living once had given them this gift, the calm of men who had done it, the humility to do it by the book, and the courage to keep moving because their country made living possible. The pass at Kasserine stank of burned oil and despair in February 1943. Grants and Lees lay crooked in the dust, and even early Shermans burned ugly. We were green. The Africa Corps was not. The lesson was brutal and fast. Redesign racks, rewrite drills, and relearn the art of combined arms now. Reports crossed oceans, engineers cut metal, and training cadres hammered new doctrine into units that would land in Sicily by July and storm Normandy the next June. By summer 1944, the same nation that stumbled in Tunisia ran operations like a metronome. Radios synchronized artillery and armor. Engineers carried bridges on their backs. Logistics turned French lanes into arteries. A German colonel named Hans von Luck saw the change from the other side. He admitted the Americans had first-class tanks and anti-tank guns, and, more terrifying to him, supply dumps that replaced every deficiency fast. He was watching Kasserine's students become Normandy's teachers. That arc is the American story. Fail, tell the truth, fix it, and scale it so big that the first failure becomes impossible to repeat. Tanks that had cooked off were reborn with wet stowage. Crews who had died now lived to drill rookies. Artillery that had arrived late now arrived in minutes. The noise of mastery was not triumphal. It was orderly. You could hear it in the correct map grid, the crisp fire when ready, the clatter of standard parts sliding into place. By the time Shermans nosed into bocage lanes, the memory of Kasserine sat in every turret as a warning and a teacher. The enemy remained skilled. Their optics were fine, their gunnery sharp, their courage real. But they faced an opponent who had turned humiliation into a nationwide project plan. The United States did not invent victory. It built it to spec, stamped it with a part number, and shipped it by the trainload. The pass that once swallowed American hope became a mile marker on the road to mastery. A foreman at the Detroit Arsenal tank plant clicked a stopwatch and watched another M4 roll off the line. By war's end, America produced roughly 49,000 Shermans, enough to equip U.S. forces, arm allies, and still maintain a flow of replacements that made fear blink first. At Willow Run, workers turned out B-24 Liberators at a pace that boggles the mind. One bomber every 63 minutes at peak. Those numbers sound like a fable until you stand under the gantry and watch hulls and wings glide like river ice. The same philosophy powered the front line. Red Ball Express convoys surged more than 12,000 tons a day to the front, the difference between a stalled offensive and a rolling tide. Radios weren't occasional, they were expected. Spare engines weren't rare, they were stacked. A tank platoon knew that if one hull died, another waited, fueled, armed, and netted. The psychological effect was massive. Courage grows when the nation proves it will not leave you empty. German staffs wrote about destroying tanks and then seeing fresh ones arrive faster than railguns could shift. The numbers broke more than plans, they broke will. Our crews carried M1 Garands and 45 pistols with the easy certainty that ammunition crates would be where the map said they'd be. A sergeant from the 4th Armoured kept a tally on his turret wall. New hulls received, parts replaced, days without a missed fire mission. The chalk marks read like a calendar of inevitability. The miracle wasn't just scale. It was scale married to a purpose. Keep citizens alive while they do dangerous things for the Republic. That is why the statistics don't feel cold. They feel like lifelines. Every 63 minutes, a bomber lifted. Every few minutes, a pallet rolled. Every hour, a convoy turned another mile. Add that rhythm to wet stowage tanks and radios on every net, and you get something beyond arithmetic. You get a nation choosing victory as an act of care. A Sherman took a penetrating hit and stopped. Smoke curled. The loader's hands found the hatch without thinking. 3 men tumbled out, coughed, and rolled behind a hedgerow where a medic's hands smelled of iodine and leather. In the old days, that hit would have been a funeral. In 1944, wet ammunition stowage turned what could have been a flash into steam, and escape routes that engineers widened on paper became doorways back to life. Mercy became math. Living crews rejoined their units within days. Living leaders trained replacements with the calm of men who had met the storm. Living tankers trusted the machine enough to push harder next time. That trust showed up in decisions at the edge of fear. Hold 1 more minute for the artillery. Reverse 1 more yard to blind a gun. Call 1 more grid, and then go. German commanders expected terror to make Americans hesitate. Instead, they saw discipline tighten like a fist. They were everywhere at once, a captured panzerman grumbled. And when you killed one, another came. He was describing not just numbers but a culture. Protect people first, keep promises, and let systems carry the rest. In a field shop, a chaplain poured coffee for a bandaged loader who wanted back on his crew. "My tank burned out," the kid said, voice raw. "I didn't." That sentence belongs in a museum. It explains why American units looked more experienced every week. Survival wasn't luck. It was a national policy expressed in clamps, brackets, and procedures. Add radios to shrink time and maintenance to stretch machines, and mercy turns into momentum. On maps, it looked like arrows. In foxholes it felt like hope. And in the mind of the enemy it sounded like a door locking behind them, one calm, methodical click at a time. Dawn, fuel at first light, ammunition at noon, repairs at dusk, convoys at midnight, the next attack at first light again. That was the rhythm of an army that refused to stop. In March 1945, the 9th Armoured Division seized the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, and American armour poured over the Rhine faster than the enemy could believe. The pattern was the same as in Normandy's hedgerows. Radios pulling artillery in minutes, engineers throwing spans under fire. Shermans, with W stowage giving crews time to live, and a supply river feeding courage. German officers, brave to the end, wrote about a masterpiece of preparation and logistics as the tide rolled past. The names on the vehicles told the rest. P-51, D Mustangs guarding the sky, B-24 seconds from Willow Run shadowing the roads, M1 Garans slung over shoulders, M4, a 3W Shermans clanking forward with crews who had learned to beat fear with drills. A GI walked past fresh hulls lined under floodlights and said, "Looks like America decided we live." That was the secret, hidden in plain sight. We did not worship giant guns or thickest armour. We worshipped the citizen in the turret and built a nation-sized machine to bring him home. When the bridgehead expanded and the rivers of trucks and tanks crossed, the impossible stopped being a headline and became a schedule. The enemy fought hard and with skill, but they could not fight a country that turned compassion into combat power, wet stowage into second chances, radios into orchestras, factories into promises. The road dust smelled like diesel and victory. The map pins pushed east until there was no more Europe left to give. Our finish wasn't luck. It was character made mechanical, kindness made lethal to tyranny, engineering made humane. That is why this story ends the way it does, with Americans tired, dirty, alive and homeward bound.